Welcome to the Programming Lions podcast. Today we have a special guest. Jayden joins us, a transgender individual who has been following our account and engaging with our content for a while, both in support and as a critic. Ultimately, Jayden reached out and said, "You might have a couple things wrong. I'd love to connect with you guys and clear the air and maybe understand a little bit more about how you think." And it was really in good faith. And so that kicked off this discussion. So what you'll find is it's very conversational. We dig into a lot of different topics. And while we don't necessarily agree on everything, especially certain elements of transgender ideology, we did, reach across the aisle and try to understand each other better. And I think that's always a good thing to do. And I hope this can be an example for a lot of people that you may not agree with somebody on everything, but usually when you get together, you find humanity, you find empathy, and you find common ground on things. And that's exactly what we did here. And this was a really enjoyable conversation. One part that was unfortunately missed is after the recording stopped, Max and Jayden spent another 20, 30 minutes geeking out on football, fantasy football, the upcoming draft, etc. And so it was just really cool to see people that you wouldn't necessarily normally connect with, finding common ground and common interests and really getting along and having a good time and some laughs. Without further ado, let's get into the podcast. Jayden, welcome to the show. We're excited to have you on. I wanted to give just a little background on how we met and got connected. Yeah. So you have been, I don't know, perhaps like a fan and a critic, a little bit of both on our page. But you've been,
I guess you could say that. Yeah,
you've been following us for a bit, and we got some feedback, and then you chimed in on a post or two that we made, and wanted to get connected and share a little bit more perspective with us directly. And so we're open to that. We didn't script any of this. So all those naysayers that say we script everything, well, we didn't script
I got
anything.
no paper. I got no paper right here.
Yeah. So this is intended to be a raw discussion. But you reached out in good faith, and we always appreciate that. And we, by nature, are very curious. And so it's best if you can learn from people that are very connected to the space and know a lot about it. And so that's why we're here today. But before we get into some of the questions around all of this, would you mind just giving a little bit of intro about yourself and your background?
Yeah. So my name's Jayden. I am 53 years old, almost 54. So I got another month or so for that. Yes. And I'm a transgender female. And I know some of the definitions, like we'll kind of get into that later, where things get a little confusing as far as, well, does she really look like a woman, or do they really look like a woman, and pronouns and all that stuff. And I can get into my opinions on that. But I started to transition in June of 22. Insurance has been a problem sometimes, so I kind of had to stop once in a while, but it's been pretty much from there. And I've been on HRT, that's hormone replacement therapy, for the same amount of time. And I did happen to watch or listen to Dr. Bobby Lancaster. And it was a lot of things she said resonated with me, especially the part where your life's in black and white and then boom, comes to color. And that's really how I was. Like, I was in a real bad rut, and I didn't know. And this is something that's been going on all my life, but it was difficult for me to get there. And finally I did get there through some things of, talking to people and kind of understanding where all this was coming from. And yeah, so I mean, but it is evolving for me. This can drive conservatives crazy too, but I don't say I'm a finished product now. It might be like another few months or another year, I decide to either take it further or maybe, I'm good now, and I'm letting my instincts carry it. And that's been, so far, it's been very helpful for me.
Okay. Well, thanks for sharing that. And that gives the audience a bit of perspective on where you're coming from in this conversation. As we kick things off, before we get into the transgender topics much, you came in contact with our show. Help me, like, how did you come in contact with us? And what's your take on our channel and show?
Yeah, so it was funny. So so I get random, like everyone does, in your reels. You just go through your reels, and one day, Will and Max they popped up with their values. The values didn't allow liberals.
The conservative kid thing or something.
Oh, sorry.
Like that?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Well, like they were sitting like on both sides of each other, and one would say one thing they didn't like, and the other would say the other thing they didn't like. But it was about liberals and stuff, you know.
Yeah.
One
Okay.
one
Yeah.
of one of them was like blue
Oh yeah,
hair.
I remember that.
One of them was wearing a mask in the car when you're
Okay.
driving. Yeah, yeah. So that was the first. Okay, and I'm gonna be totally honest with you guys because I just am. So like I saw that and I'm like, oh my gosh. So somebody actually wrote a comment and said, you know, which we can get into that too. That's deplorable what people are saying, but people are writing, oh, wait till they get older and you know they're gonna say this and say that, and I'm like,
Yeah.
you know, and it for you know, and it you know, I was tempted at first because I'm like, oh, where are they going with this? Where are they going with this? But I said, you know what? Let me look into this a little bit further. Let me see what's going on. And what I found was watching the other ones, and you know, I'll be honest because I even said this in the messages to you guys. I like it because it allows me to look at things from a different perspective. How you guys do it, it's very consumable, you know, for people, even if they're not huge into politics. That makes me think some of the things that, you know, I watched and I was like, wow, you know, that's a good point. And it makes me reevaluate it. Does it change my mind sometimes? No, but then sometimes it makes me go, well, you know what, maybe, you know, I should look a little bit differently at that. But some of the real quick, the one with the, oh my gosh, the Fortnite one.
Yeah. You like that one?
A+ material.
Yeah, that was
I laughed out
funny.
that
loud.
was like ideated and scripted entirely. The boys were like, this whole Signal Gate thing, wouldn't it be funny if we were playing Fortnite and the chat the chat
Their
you know,
terminology was like so right on for everything too, like all the wording and and I saw their faces pop up. I'm like, oh my goodness, no, they're not doing that. But that was just, you know. So I've appreciated, you know, really opening my mind to some other concepts and ideas. And I like that. So that's how I ended up, you know, following and all that. So yeah, that's how that all started.
Okay, very very cool. Yeah, that was a fun video we did, right, boys?
That
Remember the Fortnite one?
It was a fun one to make.
Yeah, in that case, we were actually mocking. Like we do a lot of, I don't want to say a lot, but I mean, we do a decent amount of mocking. A lot of times we try to mock ideas, not necessarily individuals. But in this case, we mocked the Signal Gate issue with Hegseth and JD Vance and the leak, the leak of all that. Yeah.
Are you guys in the right chat?
So that was.
Is that a new IPO? Yeah, it was
yeah.
good. It was just good stuff, man. It was good stuff.
That was pretty funny, and so we've done that a couple times. Interestingly, we seem to get negative feedback no matter, you know, what we cover, but and we can get into some of that. You've seen our comment section and all of that, and
oh man, you
it's
know,
wild.
Yeah, and even if it is a video that I don't like necessarily agree with, you know, where you're coming from. That's the things that people. It's just
people are insane.
Yeah, I mean, it's like terrible, and I'm sorry you guys have to like deal with that because you know not everybody who doesn't see from your point of view is like that. And how it comes off is, since those are usually the loudest in the room and most obnoxious in the room, that's the take sometimes people get. But you know, I don't want you guys to think that everybody's like that, and liberals aren't always like that either. So
it is wild, some of the stuff we get, and we get a lot of direct messages too. And I share these with the boys, but we get like people wanting to kill us. Like we have people sending us our home address, and I'm watching you, and I'm gonna do this to your dad and do this to your mom, and it's
they send you your address.
Yeah, we've been doxxed at this point, meaning, you know, I've had my, like all of our information out and shared, and I've had people send me my social security number, and
oh man,
yeah, and like pretty disgusting threats to the level of death and torture.
Who would like want to take time just to like bully this family channel who's just trying to get their word out?
Yeah,
it's so weird.
And we know that not everybody agrees with our takes, and we're learning. We've maybe evolved some of our takes on things, and even the LGBT movement or transgender debate is an interesting one. We talked to Dr. Bobby. We were talking to you today. We had this topic on a recent youth roundtable, and so
also a dude about people switching back.
Oh yeah, we also had on. I don't know if you saw this one, Jayden, but we had a gentleman on who on our podcast Jordan Campbell, who represents detransitioners, and he's seen hundreds and hundreds of cases. I'd say like hundreds and hundreds, but a few hundred cases that have come to him in that regard. It was just interesting getting that perspective as well of those individuals.
I
But
did listen to that, by the way.
okay,
Yeah.
okay. So we're trying to like understand a lot of things, and lately we've also had lengthy conversations with communists, and that's interesting too. All that aside, did you boys have any, or did you have questions for us, me, the boys, about the channel, the way we do things that you want to start with? And then, of course, we have some things we'd love to pick your brain about.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess a good way to start, because if we are having conversations about it, I guess, how would you all define transgender?
Somebody who was the opposite sex, but they eventually wanted to be the other sex. So
Okay. Yeah. So it doesn't actually involve, getting your nails done or going to therapy or going to surgery. You can be transgender and not do any of that. And it seems like you guys have an understanding of that. So I just want to make sure, because if we're using that word a lot, if you have an idea of, I just want us to be on the same plane when we're talking about that word. Otherwise, it could get kind of confusing as far as that is concerned. But as far as anything else, it just sometimes the tone seems like that you guys don't really like transgender people too much, and
Mm.
it's sort of like it comes from it almost seems like it's used sometimes to make another point, and it just sort of
Mhm.
like to me it kind of feels like piling on, and that's just
Yeah.
kind of like how I feel about it. And I know I went kind of nuclear in the one video. Though it was the pancake one. I don't know
Yeah.
why that one put me over the edge. That one put me over the edge.
Mm.
Because I just wanted to see, because I hear Max saying this, liberals don't and I don't mean to put you on the spot, Max. I'm just, whatever you don't.
Oh, it's fine.
Okay. But like he's saying liberals don't understand what women are, yet we're concerned about their rights and all
Mhm.
that. So it's just inaccurate.
Yeah.
Well-
Yeah. Well, maybe, and Max, like you, why don't you describe your intent behind that
Well,
video?
yeah, so basically me and my dad, so we were on Instagram together, we were just like sitting together, and then next thing you know, this video popped up where this guy was at a protest for women's rights, and then he asked one of the like a group, he was like, define like what a woman is, and you're like, well, I don't know. So then that's really what intended us to do the video. So yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Okay.
think,
I mean,
and to give you more
get it.
context, like when you see somebody, for example, at a protest for women's rights, and then a reporter says, "Well, so what is that? What are you fighting for?" And they say, "I don't know. I can't define it." And so, at least at a minimum, you'd think that the people going to the march would be pre-registered in terms of, I could be asked this question. I should be able to define what it is that I'm fighting for, or the type of individual and their rights that I'm fighting for. And so it seems like very hypocritical, ironic, whatever, that people at the protest don't even know how to define what it is they're representing.
Yeah, that's bad.
So that's essentially what we're making. So we're not making, and just to be clear, like, we're not making fun of people. We empathize, and I think we care about people, but it's so strange when you ask somebody what they're fighting for and they don't know.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, and that's good actually context for the video, because I do understand that more. Yeah, I mean, I mean, probably a lot of these is more of, again, it's nothing personal what you're saying. You're just kind of bring it to the forefront,
Mm-hmm.
or what have you, because I mean, Matt, you transitioned to Centaur. Have you detransitioned? Because
So
you look a little different right now.
I know, right? Well, and this would be actually fun to get your take on some of this, because you said, well, again, like, we're not trying to offend you here, but actually, I think it's really valuable to get your perspective directly on some of the videos that we put out, because we aren't necessarily trying to mock or offend individuals. However, some of the concepts or the logic around it, we find like very confusing. Okay, so there's the idea of being transgender gender, and I've put out a couple of videos where I was trans species, right? I was now centaur. I'm like, I feel half horse, half man, and I'm centaur, and my pronouns are centaur, and that didn't go over very well with the community. I've also put out one that was I'm trans age.
Oh yes, I
And
saw that.
Snarf.
You're 73, right?
yes, I said I'm trans age, and I expect to be collecting my social security. And so, and what it is, so that I could provide some context, it's really it's an extension of these same ideas into other areas. Like you could say trans race, trans age, trans species. And so I know it's this like questionable slippery slope argument maybe, but there is a universe where that same logic could be applied. Like you hear people on the age topic, for example, you hear people that are young at heart, or they're old souls. And so who's from saying that you can't have a body dysmorphia with the way that you feel and your actual age, right? And so then you can extend that into, well, I'm chrono queer. I don't abide by the structural standards of age or chronography, and so therefore identify as the age that I feel instead of this this biological age. And so I'm just like that was the question that I was going to ask you, is like, how do you feel about like how that logic translates into other things, and is that a risk?
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, I guess, when people were talking about that there are litter boxes in schools because kids were claiming they're a cat, is that what you're referring to? And things like that, or
Well, boys, we saw furry just the other day, right?
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, yeah. That was
This is
Yeah,
wild.
I
ice
think
cream.
the litter box in schools has been largely debunked, but furries are a thing. We just literally saw one at the ice cream store the other day. That girl who came in as a cat. Yeah,
It was a hybrid. I think it was like a fox and a raccoon.
yeah. Her tail didn't match the top. It was kind of a. But anyway, but those are
I
some of the
mean,
posts.
yeah.
So those are some of the posts that we've put out, and I understand how those can offend people. But I've done like the trans age thing. I also did one around, if I remember right, I did one around non-binary. I was like, yeah, so if you're non-binary, you're
You're actually
actually
binary.
not conforming to a system that is binary or non-binary. So by definition, you're still binary. And like obviously, like people were like not happy about that either. So
Yeah, I mean, for me, since I am a trans person, I like to give more, I guess, latitude for things like that. Even though, like inside in my mind, I might be like, well, I don't know about that. But if I expect people to give respect to me, then I want to at least respect them and find out what's going why they feel that way, or just have a conversation with them. I
yeah.
don't want to judge in a way to be like, oh well, you can only it only counts if it's this, because that's hypocritical and that's not fair. But I think where a lot of this is coming from is that our pres of the United States, he pretty much he said I don't exist anymore, and he said a whole bunch of other people don't exist anymore, and it's now LGB. So
Right.
obviously
Right.
the message from the most powerful person in the world is I don't exist anymore. And I think, and I'll be honest, yeah, I think I think it builds up after a while, where like I'm seeing a lot of different things, and that's my issue, really. If I'm getting upset by watching, different things on Instagram, and then I need to monitor my time appropriately, because that's my issue. But at the same time, I think that's where a lot of the frustration comes in, where we're being told over and over and over again, we don't exist, whatever, we're done. And then we see some other stuff that feels like piling on, and then that's for me, that's where the frustration comes in. And I'm just speaking for myself on that, but I'm sure there are others that feel
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and I can definitely empathize with that, and I can say this: well, I'm not trying to hurt anybody's feelings when we put out some of these posts, or the boys on anything that we react to. On the other hand, it's like some of the logic we struggle with, and we can get into more of that. But like some of the logic we struggle with in terms of like how to define these things. But your point around existence and it's really, so we might see it a little bit differently. where, and I'm not saying I agree or disagree with what Trump is doing in terms of removing the TQ from the acronym in federal documents. I think my understanding of the intention is that they're trying to remove this compelling of new language and terms into society and bring that sort of back to like central. And so in general, I think people look at it like, well, you're gay or you're lesbian or maybe bi, and so there's the LGB, and then people who want to present as more masculine or feminine, like kind of do your thing, but let's not make up new terms for this sort of like infinite spectrum between hyper masculine and hyper feminine. Let's just let people be who they are. I think that's more of the intent around it. And like, how do you see that versus having like unique terms for all of this?
I mean, okay. Well, I mean, how are we defining feminine, right? I know I've known many women. Some are more feminine than others. Some are maybe considered more masculine. People have an idea of what a woman should be, right? Or what a woman, you see someone and say, okay, well that person is a woman because that's what I believe in to be a woman. But it doesn't necessarily mean it may not be a woman you're used to seeing. They can still be a woman, and it's difficult too because one of the things about like growing up and kind of not knowing where you're at is searching for labels. Like labels are important because if you've never had one, you kind of want one because you're not you never had a place to put yourself. You never knew like where you belong and such. So that's where some of this language comes, where these kind of a little bit of what you're talking about, we're adding in letters and different things like that. But of course, LGB is a sexual orientation, which is a lot different from transgender, because transgender and sexual orientation are not relatable. They're not related at all.
Yeah. That's a valid point.
So I've heard that there are a lot of terms nowadays, and I feel like, not to be like mad or not to whatever, but I feel like sometimes you need a dictionary because I don't know what these terms mean. So like, how can we like keep these simple?
No, I get it. I don't know some of them either, to be honest with you. There is some new ones coming out that begin with a Z or an X. I'll be honest with you. I didn't know where people are going with that. But my take is it's people trying to feel comfortable about themselves. Like it's people trying to fit in somewhere. It's people trying to find something. As unusual as it may sound to us, and I'll say us because I don't know a lot of those other ones. It provides comfort for them. It provides comfort because now they have a place, and kind of what I alluded to before. If you don't have a title or name to call yourself, it's lonely. You don't know where to go, and it's just sort of like, well, where do I fit in? And people will do that to help themselves fit into it. As far as your question, to kind of make things a little bit easier, well, I guess the Prez already did that. So I mean, somebody can say that personally about what they feel about themselves, but as far as the country is concerned, right, that it's male, it's male, female. But something else, if somebody ever does say to you, oh, I'm what have you, it's okay to ask them and be like, hey, is it okay if I ask you, what that means? I'm not too sure. And then you can kind of formulate your own opinion of it and see what it is. So does that make sense for that answer? Kind of.
Yeah, I think it does seem, new terms are kind of getting added to the pronoun spectrum frequently. And for example, we had a discussion with some other younger people the other day, and they're, referring to me as cis man. And I don't know, like, why can't I just, I didn't ask to be called cis. I don't know. Why can't you just, why does that have to be a thing? Why cis? Why does everybody that doesn't identify in LGBT have to get a new name too?
That's kind of a funny point. Yeah. I mean, it's for conversational sake, and usually it's used. Although I have seen it spread, it's usually more used in circles if I'm talking to other trans people or if I'm talking to somebody else about the subject. Then yeah, cis would come up. But I have noticed it popping up in just articles I'm reading, and I'm thinking, people may not even know what this means or
Yeah.
what it is. So I mean, I get that part of it, but the reason why I feel that's there is to help separate the one from the other when you're talking about the two different people. But I do understand, yes, yeah. What you you didn't ask for a label, so why do you have to? Why do you have to?
Yeah, it feels like like that term came up and the boys were like, what is cis? What does that mean? So we had to go over that, and now we understand. But yeah, to me, it feels like if somebody wants a unique label and wants to identify with that unique label, that's good for them. But do we need to have everybody else sort of comply to a similar standard? That seems like
That's
a
a
little
fair
bit too
point.
far.
Yeah,
And I think
that's a fair point.
I think that's an area that people do get angst over, and and we are outwardly conservative in terms of our values and everything, but generally it's like when when one's rights infringe on another, that's where we start getting like a little bit of angst. And so for example, like thou shalt put pronouns in your bio, that is not, it's not legally required in a lot of places, but I will say from like personal experience working in a business, it was highly encouraged, which essentially like means if you don't do it, then you run the risk of being that person at the company that's, you didn't put
Yeah,
your pronouns in the bio, like you're a bad person, and so you get labeled as now a bad person because you don't do that. And so it's essentially required even though it isn't legally or required. And of course we know that if a lot of those in the LGBT community had their way, like pronouns would be a requirement. And so like what are your thoughts about pronouns? I'm curious.
I care about it probably the least. To be honest, like I really don't care.
Hmm.
For me personally, I know for a lot of people it's very, very important. If somebody calls me, yeah, I mean, if somebody calls me like it says ma'am or whatever, I'm like, oh, okay, I guess I'm looking pretty good today or something. And then if they call me sir, I'm fine with it because even though I'm a trans woman, I feel more masculine, So I can see why people would understand that. I don't understand people kind of losing it over the fact that somebody misgenders them. I went to visit a friend last summer and she has a trans son. And I knew her son when he wasn't son, when he was identified as female.
Yeah.
And last summer, and even though I'm where I'm at, I misgendered him a couple of times because
Sure.
I knew him as younger girl. It was
Yeah,
difficult.
your memory was conditioned to
Yes,
remember.
it
Yeah.
just
Hmm.
and you don't even think of it; it just pops out. But then, for example, my doctor I go to is trans man, but I've only seen him as a trans man. I would never think of calling him a woman. Like it doesn't would pop into my mind or what have you. But I just think there should be a little more understanding about that and understand, hey, it's, and especially for me, I was a little bit older when I pursued this, and all my friends have been great about it, been super great. But it's the understanding. Sometimes whatever, somebody might say something like that, and I don't care. I just tell
Hmm.
people, just you can call me what you want, as far as that's concerned. That
Yeah.
doesn't bother me. But I know for some people
Yeah.
it is a hot button topic, and I don't want.
I can say it's generally, I think people are trying to be polite in life. People want to be polite and they want to be respectful. And so I can say for us, like if somebody changes their name, I had somebody work for me, for example, that transition, and this
Oh, wow.
individual changed their name from a masculine name to a more feminine name. And they're like, this is my name. Okay, I'll call you by the name that you want to be called. That's just how it worked. And so I think generally like people are fine with that and want to be polite, but also there's this like anxiety that cis people have about, oh, did I misgender them? And oh, I'm now a bad person. And they feel like you're walking on eggshells. So I honestly think like there's this sliver of the population that just gets really bent out of shape if you say the wrong thing or you reference somebody the wrong way. It's not necessarily intentional, but it happens. And so then those are the types of issues that you see, they blow up, they go up on social media. I was misgendered. But generally, I think in the people that we've talked to in the trans community, there's like, oh, it happens. Like it's fine. We'll maybe correct you, but we're not going to hold grudges, and we understand. And it sounds like that's kind of the same place that you're coming from.
But yeah, absolutely. No, I see the things on Instagram where someone's like, I was misgendered. And you're like, look, if you look at the video and you're like, I can see that, I don't know. I just think it would be a little more, people need to have a little more patience and understanding where other people are coming from. Because if we expect people to be like, oh, we want them to understand us, we should understand from their point of view, this is different. We weren't ready for this, and now this is what we're doing. So I think it's got to work both ways.
So I'm curious because I've heard Dad, you, and like Mom, back in your guys' day, right? There were no trans people in your schools, right? It was just
Right.
or like straight people.
Mm-hmm.
But now, with me and Max, right, we see trans people or people that are turning like more feminine or sometimes a little bit more masculine a lot more often than what you guys have described, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious to ask you about why you think the number of children has gone up with becoming trans.
Yeah, that's a good question. First of all, do you guys have bathroom stall doors? In your schools? Because we didn't have those either. Matt, did you have stall doors for your toilets?
No, in fact, it was, I mean,
Right?
you and I are similar in age, so we didn't have stalls on a lot of our bathrooms, and our shower systems were like a pole with a number of showers around them. So we'd all shower completely naked together in gym class and after athletics or sports events and everything. And today, yes, it's much different. They have stalls. Boys, you can describe it, but you have stalls and even
With
your
doors
showers
on.
are separated. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. I want to, that just brought me back when you said back to my school days. So, yeah, you're right. When I was in high school, like there might be some guys that you're kind of like, oh, yeah, they're probably gay, like just kind of how they act or whatever. But, back then, there wasn't, internet wasn't around, or you could go to the library and try to do some research and things like that. Now the information it's out there. People can kind of figure it out. And it is a lot more accepting. There's no way in high school I would have been, no way. I mean, it wouldn't have ended well. I mean, I was going to say it like that. It just wouldn't have ended well. So there wasn't really an option for that. I do think there is a component to where some people might see people they admire or maybe like a friend of theirs, and they happen to see that they're trans, and they might be like, oh, and they may not even know yet. Like they might be 12, 13, 11, but not really have even an idea of that. But it seems, oh, this is the way to go, my friends like this. So
Like a social pressure
yeah,
type of thing.
yeah. What I think most of it is that there's just more information available, and people are able to instead of putting themselves in a box or what have you, they're like, well, okay, I'm actually a little more of this than that, and I don't really identify as a boy completely, but this is what I'm feeling a little bit over here. So that wasn't how we were brought up. It wasn't like you just you were what you were, and if you did something that wasn't necessarily within your gender or what it should be, you're often corrected or someone's going to say something to you about it. So it's a little bit of both, I think. I don't mean to be wishy-washy on that answer, but I really do think it's a little bit of both as far as that's concerned. But
Yeah.
there definitely is having that knowledge. It's allowed people to feel more comfortable coming out.
It makes sense that it would be a bit of both. And so I appreciate you like acknowledging that it's probably a little bit of both. We had, as you know, Dr. Bobby Lancaster on our podcast, and she said the same kind of thing. It's like, well, there's definitely like a major component that is acceptance. Like people feel more comfortable because there's a community and there's support, and you can be your true self without as much backlash or risk maybe as it would have been decades ago. But then there's also things like, some people call it social contagion, but you could call it rapid onset gender dysphoria. And it's actually happening a lot in young females right now, where they're at an adolescent age, and they hadn't presented previously a strong desire to be the opposite sex, but then they start hanging out with a new crowd, and all of a sudden they do. And so that would be more of like a social thing. And so there are some, I think, legitimate concerns in that regard, because it used to be, and you probably know the data on this, but I'll speak of this, it might be a little bit off, but it's largely, it used to be around 90% of new trans identifying individuals were men identifying as women. And now today, or in the last couple of years, it's changed, completely flipped, where it's 75% females transitioning to being trans men, and most of that comes from adolescent girls that are, let's just say, largely in a susceptible range, right? They're developing and they're trying to figure out life, and they got friends and there's social media and there's all these things going on. And so I think for those reasons, there's a lot of skepticism in, well, what is the rate between acceptance and social pressure, right? I don't know the answer, but I think it's fair to say that there is some of both. I just don't know like what the ratio is.
Yeah, I don't know. Are we talking about people? I think it's one point to say that this is what somebody might be feeling at this right now, but I don't feel like there's a whole bunch of people who are trying to be like other people or have you going in there and trying to get, surgery and gender, like HRT and all that stuff. I mean, I don't have any numbers on that, but I would be surprised if it got to that point. When I did, and I did also listen to the pod. The one thing just I wasn't sure about was, he said people were going in and some people were getting surgery done. And I was like, and I looked that up because I wanted to fact check that. And yes, there is a certain number, but then I say, where are the parents? During Trump's address to Congress, there was a mother who stood up, and her child was transitioning at school, and she had no idea.
Yeah.
I mean, that has to be a pretty uninvolved parent, in my opinion. Like to not know that any of that stuff's going on, and then, okay, go ahead, we're gonna blame the school, and we're gonna blame all this because my child obviously could talk to you, but not me. So there's that too.
Yes, I think that's actually a really fair point, in terms of there is a lot of I don't know, frustration, let's say, I see on social media, or you hear, especially from the conservative movement, about parents saying that their kid transitioned without their knowledge, or the school didn't tell them about it. And I agree with you that there's got to be some level, you're disconnected. If my child is going through this much sort of mental anguish and challenges in their life, and I don't notice it, and I'm not going out of my way to ask the teacher what they're seeing at school and anything like that, before it gets to the point where the school obfuscates my, parental sort of authority and lets the kid kind of go this route on their own without telling me. Yeah, it seems like there's something broken there. Like the parent has a level of responsibility there that they're missing out on. And so I completely agree with that. But simultaneously, I would agree that like the school should be telling the parents about these things, so that it's their child, right? Like it's their
Oh no,
child.
I would agree with that. I would agree with
Yeah.
that also, for sure.
These things aren't always cut and dry, as you know. There's a lot of nuance in any of these issues, and so there's definitely like parent responsibility, there's school responsibility, and so we're on this topic of children, or let's if we define a child as 18 or under, let's say under 18. What are your thoughts about that? And you like, actually, before we get to that, could we get maybe a little bit more background on your story? So you said you struggled with your identity for a long time. You transitioned in 2022, and you are feeling more like liberated since you've done this. At what point in your life did you have these tendencies, or feel like I'm just not in the right like
Yeah.
body or frame?
So when I was like, I think the earliest I remember is 8 years old, and I was obsessed with nail polish. And I would like, when my parents weren't there, I'd sneak into the room and I'd take some of my mom's nail polish and put it on. And like, The best way to say it, what I felt when I did that was, did you talk about gender dysphoria and stuff? That was gender euphoria.
Mm-hmm.
And I just always, and from that point till all my, like, I was always collecting some kind of nail polish or whatever.
Okay.
I didn't want to wear it out or whatever, because I wasn't to that point, to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But that was something that was always with me. I had some female attire that I'd buy once in a while, or I did some makeup, not a lot, but some, and it just made me feel like, it just made me feel right. I mean, since I've been on HRT, I have grown breasts, so I have breasts now,
Mm-hmm.
and some would say, like, when I look in the mirror, it's not, oh wow, that's like new or whatever. It's like it was always there, or like it was always supposed to be there. So when I see myself now, it's that's the way it should be, as
Mm.
opposed to what I was looking at before.
Okay.
And that's kind of how that all went through. So to kind of answer your question a little bit better, I mentioned I wasn't like doing my nails or anything like that in public. But then I had a vacation. It came up at work, and I said, "Oh, you know what? I'm just going to get them done, and then by the end of the week, I'm going to get them off." And after I got them done, and the week's going by, I'm thinking, you know what? I can't get these. I don't want to take them off. So I
Sure.
decided, hey, I'm going to go to work with these, and we're going to see where it lands. I would rather deal with that than going there and getting these taken off. That's to the point. And one of the things too, dressing like this out. I mean, I'm in Virginia, so like Northern Virginia, so it's fairly liberal, but sometimes it's not so liberal.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes a certain, it's not easy to do. I'm just going to say it's not always easy to do, but
Oh, I imagine. Yeah.
but I'll flip it to this. It'd be more difficult for me to not do it, if you know what
Okay.
I mean, in my mind. Like, if I didn't do it, if I said, I'm not going to go out there because I'm worried what they're going to say, I'm going to be upset with myself, because I'm not living me. I'm not being me anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm being what all they want. And you know what? I did that for my first 50 years. I was what all they wanted before, but now it's different. And yeah, no, I get looks, I get side eyes, I get this stuff. I was really sensitive at first about it, but as you kind of go through it, you kind of care less and less, and you get, even more, you're just feeling better about yourself, more confident about yourself, because you're being who you are.
Mm.
And it's such an important thing. And how this opens up, and to Dr. Bobby's point about the going from black and white to color. I mean, that's a perfect analogy that it was for me too, where I was enjoying work. I used to despise work, but now it's like, all right, work's pretty good. And
Mm-hmm.
because I just had a better attitude about everything. And I wouldn't say it cured a lot of the things going on, but it really made things a lot better for me, and I'm so happy about it.
Okay. Well, I'm happy for you that you're happy. That's good. Can I ask about, did you have any trauma in your early life, childhood, or anything that you think may have, I don't know, had an influence on this?
Well, I mean, I do believe. I mean, it's a biological thing that's happening. It's and that's always been something that kind of popped in my mind once in a while. Because yeah, I mean, my dad was a raging alcoholic. It wasn't good. I mean, it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't good. Oh, sorry. Okay, I hit my mouse, so I moved you guys. Sorry. Yeah, it wasn't a good situation to be in. And my mom, when she was younger, she dealt with an alcoholic mom who ended up, dying in a fire, and she had to take care of all of her brothers. And now she's married to this person who's an alcoholic, and it was a very, I mean, to say it was a mess.
Mm-hmm.
It was a mess going on over there. So, my mom did the best she could, but it wasn't easy. So those are the thing that's the thing I can say, really, just not having, I guess, what you'd say a childhood with a family. For me, family construct is such a weird thing, because now it's just my mom, my brother, and I, and we all live in different places, but we all keep in touch. I hear about people with these big families, and I'm jealous, I have to admit, because it seems kind of, you have a lot of more people maybe that you
Mm-hmm.
get that are on your side.
Support network with family, and yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, definitely, I definitely had that going on, and it wasn't easy, and I've suffered through depression and
Mm-hmm.
anxiety as well.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry to hear that, obviously, and I ask because there, in my personal anecdotal experience, talking to several people from this community, I ask that because I trying to correlate does trauma have some impact on one's gender identity and preferences and things like that? Is it an outlet, right? Is it a community
Yeah.
they can get a part of because they didn't have that community at home? Or I don't really know, but I'm not a psychiatrist or a doctor in that regard, but it's a curious correlation to me.
Yeah, and just real fast too, I've kind of had theories on it. Yes, I do feel it's something that's innate and biological in me, but I think it was helped by the fact that maybe, and this is just I'm spitballing here, but I saw what kind of man my father was, right? So
Mm-hmm.
maybe for me in my mind somewhere, especially when I was younger, things got, well, you never want to be like that, and then maybe it got into that, he's a male. So there's a lot of things. Yeah, there's a lot of things to it. I wish there was something where people can just say you're trans, you're not trans. It's a lot, and that's why I say for me, I'm always evolving. I can't say I'm going to be exactly the same in a year. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. But like I said, I just follow my instincts on it.
Okay, fair enough. Boys, what other questions did you have?
Well, I have a question about, so since, like, how do I really say this, but like, what are you guys like fighting for as trans people, and what are you guys fighting for?
What kind of rights?
Yeah, what kind of rights?
We just want to live our lives, man. Like we just want to be able to be who we are, and there's a lot of impediments to that, and there's getting even more impediments to that. And we just that's what we want. I've some trans friends as well, and we're just trying to go to the store and just be who we want to be, and not have to worry about, what the government's going to do next, or whatever, or what laws you're trying to pass in Texas where, if you can't dress like a woman if you're a guy, or it's just all this stuff. And you guys can hop in if I'm missing something on that, but I don't think it's that the trans community is asking for that much just to be recognized. Unless you guys see something different, you can definitely question me on it.
Yeah, I think from our perspective, and boys, correct me, but like we are generally like conservative to libertarian, and we feel like people can and should be able to live freely the way that they want to live, and the way that they want to be, or the way that they want to present themselves, even.
Yeah.
Up to a point where they infringe on somebody else's rights. Now, if there's an infringement on somebody else's rights, then that's where things get sticky. And so, at least from us, I'd say we will, yes, in some of our clips, like we'll have some edgy content that might criticize views of the community. However, in terms of like rights, and I can't speak for all conservatives, but we would say that none of this we have angst with outside of areas where others' rights are perhaps infringed. So that would be things like sports, like spaces that are maybe protected or were intended to be protected for females. And I think with adults it's a little bit different. But when I think of like young girls in a middle school or high school locker room and a biological male coming in there, and so I want to be sensitive to the fact that this trans individuals is going through and they're trying to find their way, but also there's all the biological females in the locker room that might not be up for this. Okay, so I think those are, and I don't know, boys, I think those are the two areas that we would say we have angst over, that we want to make sure that we're not infringing and we're protecting the rights and equality for people in those areas.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, as far as the restrooms are concerned, I mentioned my doctor, trans man. We would not want him walking into a woman's room because he does not look like a woman.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to cause more problems than anything else. This idea that like trans people are trying to either, I don't know, look at people in the bathroom or whatever. And again, there's going to be exceptions, so I can't say,
Yeah.
100%.
Well, bathrooms, bathrooms that have individual stalls and stuff, I think one could have a reasonable argument. This is a public place, like assaults and weird things don't really happen in public places like that. And so that might be fine. I guess like I see it more in terms of locker rooms. I mean, you hear, for example, the Riley Gaines story of, hey, we were getting dressed to go compete in the swim event, and this 6'4" individual comes in and changes right next to me completely, and I think about, she's in college. However, like you think about that for girls down to middle school age, that could be a little bit hard for some of them to grasp and understand. And so I'm sensitive to that.
Yeah.
And then I think also just sensitive to athletics where there might be a distinct advantage. You could argue, I think, that there's a lot of sports and activities that biological sex may not have an advantage, but there certainly are others. There's track, field, combat sports, things like that. There's got to be really, really careful, and there could be maybe medical levels or limits that we could put on this, but that requires a lot of regulation. And so those are areas where, yeah, I'd want to be fair in protecting biological women from unfair advantages that might come into their space. So what's your take on that?
For the sports, it's a safety issue, it's a competitive issue, and just leave it at that. There isn't any way that you can take certain people who might be a little bit bigger and say, no, you can't compete.
Right.
You're trans, you can't compete, but you're too big. But you're trans and you compete, you're too small. It has to be a border down the line, and that's where I would side with you guys on. And I'd just say, yeah, it's a safety issue, it's a competitive issue, and that's it. Now, I mean, I ran cross country and track in college and stuff, so I was into sports and all that. I was always thinking, like, even if I decided to transition, I had surgeries and things like that, I wouldn't want to run under the female name on that because of the things that you're talking about, and I would feel like I was cheating and not being forthright with myself and the other people. That's to me that just it wouldn't sit well with me. I mean, I do understand it in the schools where it's a little bit different, but I mean, if you think about it, like in soccer, what if you're under 12, it's mixed anyway?
Yeah,
or under 11,
yes,
something like that.
Max plays flag football right now. Max, you're 11, and in flag football, you have girls and boys playing, right?
Yep.
Yeah, and that seems like fine because they're also not at a size where they're really going to be hurting each other. This is not a contact sport. I think around puberty age, right?
Yeah.
That's where it
Absolutely.
starts getting more dicey.
Yeah, and I mean, I can understand where the person in high school, if they're trans, would want to be, but there has to be there has to be a common sense understanding that safety. I mean, safety is a concern for sure. That's 100%. And then also you want to keep it competitive for everybody, and that's a competitive unfair advantage. So if it was something else that was giving somebody an unfair competitive advantage, they wouldn't allow it.
Yeah. I think we can. Do you have other questions for us? Otherwise, I got a couple of closing things, and we can start kind of wrapping it up.
No, I just want to say, you guys do make me think a lot, and I appreciate it. And the boys they're incredible on the mic, man, and on the camera and all that. So I don't know if that's a natural thing or what have you. It must be, or I don't know, but they just sort of, I don't know. Their facial expressions are really good, and yeah.
I appreciate that. Well, it's been great getting to know you. I appreciate you reaching out and taking interest and digging a little bit deeper on all this. I think we learned a lot from you. And anytime you connect with people who are going through stuff and everything, it brings empathy to the situation. It personalizes everything, right? And so for me, that's always valuable. And I think it's also valuable to just show we're not ill-intentioned people, but sometimes I understand how things that we might put out come across negatively. So with that, last question is, what do you think we could change in our approach that would garner more likability in your community?
I find the Thursday night group is fantastic. So I'm just wondering maybe if some way, if I think if more kids found out that was a thing,
Mhm.
I mean, Max did the video like we're being compared to the Foodie Boys. What you guys bring is so much more depth and so much more just conversations into things that honestly matter. And the guests you have on there are spectacular too. I'm impressed. I'm impressed with everybody.
We have a couple of really smart. We have one like smart communist and a smart liberal, and it's funny because like sometimes we'll get comments from people like, "Oh, that liberal kid roasted you on this or that." I personally am not offended. Like Jonah is an example. He's been a really a consistent and a sharp contributor on that thread. He's smart and he's well prepared.
Yes.
And I would rather my kids be introduced to someone like that than some doofus on the left, right, that can't articulate their points. Because what's going to better pressure test your ideas if you go up against a doofus or somebody who's like really well equipped?
Yeah.
So
That's
I
true.
don't know, like
That's true, yeah.
I wish people would appreciate that more, that we're, throwing the kids not into the lion's den, but we are trying to challenge not just my kids, but myself and others to really have a forum of ideas that we can explore together. And I think that's how we all learn.
You have to be fair to your ideas and true to your ideas. And I said, like, part of the reason why I think I took like that, I went kind of nuclear that day is just because I think it's the overall thing. It's not like just one thing. I think it's the stuff that's happening out there in society, and there's things like that. But then it almost feels, from my point of view, it feels like it's pouring on. Oh God, now we have to see this, and now we have to see that. I always look at things like lesson, like every day I'm learning something new, and this is a good lesson for me to look at that and say, okay, well, don't take things personally. Like, this is what's going on. And I appreciated the conversation because that really that cleared a lot, for what I was thinking, and just kind of seeing like what the intentions were. And so I feel a lot better about it actually now, and I appreciate you guys being so honest and forthright.
Well, good. I appreciate that. Look, thumbs up from Max. I love it. Well, hey, that's a great point to maybe close out on. So thanks so much for coming on the show. It means a lot to us. We had, I think, a lot of dialogue. We opened a lot of doors of controversial issues. And the more people can talk about this, I think it's better. It's better for everybody. So I appreciate that. And I appreciate you being a consistent sort of voice in our channel. That's awesome.
Thank you.
So.
Do I get a speed round? I heard people get speed rounds.
Oh, rapid fire.
Oh yeah,
Will, you're missing out. All right. Well, I don't have it on. All right. Well,
you know him by heart now, Max.
I know one. Okay. What kind of superpower would I want?
Yeah.
It would be whatever superpower Trigon has.
Trigon.
You saw Trigon?
You saw the Trigon video?
That one, okay. I'd say the Fortnite one and that one was I laughed so hard on that one too. And I know it's kind of against the conservatives, so people are thinking, well, that's why you found it funny. No, I would have found that funny either way.
Trigon was pretty funny.
What power does Trigon have?
I don't know. He's a super villain.
But he looks like he must have a good one. He's pretty.
Yeah, he's massive. Yeah, he's some kind of super villain. But Max found Trigon, and that was a fun post. So.
That was a good one.
Yeah. Any other rapid fire ones, Max? Come on.
Yes. All right.
Oh,
would you rather I fight 1,000-pound duck or 1,001-pound ducks? So that means one big duck or 1,000 little ducks.
Oh, dang. Well, I have to go back to my video games and how I'd prefer. Oh man, you know what? I'm gonna go for the little ones. I'm gonna go for the little ones and just figure out a plan. I don't know. I'll bring bread. I'll figure out something.
What's the coolest invention in your lifetime?
The coolest invention in my lifetime would have to be the internet and being able to access people from all over the world.
All right. And this will be the final question, rapid fire. Have you ever been stuck in a bathroom stall without toilet paper?
You know what? And I have not, actually. I have not.
Wow.
I've been lucky.
Wow.
I haven't 3 times. Just, yeah. It's
unbelievable. Max. Okay. That concludes Rapid Fire. And we'll wrap up the podcast with that. Jayden, thanks for joining us. It was a great time.
Thank you, guys. You guys are great. I appreciate the time, and I've learned some stuff today, so I appreciate it.